All right, welcome on into Totem Talks, Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith.
Yeah, that is what we decided to go with.
For those of you who have been living under a rock and have no idea what this is, from our first two wildly successful episodes.
That we're assuming are wildly successful.
Yeah.
It's always good to let the audience know that we're not doing it, live.
Yeah, this is not, we're not talking directly into your ears right now. This was actually pre-recorded from when you're listening to it.
Wow.
I know.
Nick, way to just give all our trade secrets away.
I screwed up big time.
You really did. Anyway, I'm Pat, and I'm a singer for a local Bucks County cover band called Low Totem.
And I'm Nick, and I am also in that band, and I play other things and sing as well.
You're a jack of all trades.
Yes.
And I am Tyler. I am responsible for the wardrobes for Low Totem.
You're fired.
I am why they look as good as they look.
Oh, God.
He's the reason why I don't own sleeves.
Well, that is a plus in my book.
Well, okay, fair enough.
So anyway, if you don't know what this is about, we are taking it upon ourselves to take as many popular bands and musical acts as we can think of, judge them according to criteria that if you're curious about, you can either listen to the rest of this episode, or if you want the full breakdown, listen to our first episode.
Yes, where we broke down every individual aspect of how they're being judged and exactly what those things mean. So
right. So on the docket for today, we have 3 bands, as per usual. And Nick, why don't you go ahead and tell us what they are today?
It's a great group of bands here today. Very interesting and different from our first 2 episodes. So we're starting with the Yardbirds, and then we'll be going to the Jackson 5, and finishing things up with Alice in Chains. So
yeah, no,
very
3 really
varied,
interesting
group
acts
for today.
Cool. I think we're ready to get started with the Yardbirds.
Yes, absolutely. So
yeah. So I'll give you a little bit of fact about the Yardbirds. They are an English rock band. They were active from 1963 all the way till 1968, and then again in 1992 until the present day.
yeah, very interesting.
Very, very interesting. We'll talk more about that. The Yardbirds, if you're not familiar with them, they are well known for having 3 really, really popular musical artists in them at the same time.
Not at the same time, but they would all there were. So on some albums, you'll hear both Eric Clapton and Jeff Beck.
Yeah.
And after those gentlemen left the band, the replacement was the one and only Jimmy Page.
Right. So real big names passed through the Yardbirds.
Yes, all before going on to bigger and arguably better things.
The Yardbirds were the catalyst to bigger things.
For sure.
So as for our listenings for them, we stuck to our usual formula. We listened to their first album, their most popular album, and their last album. And now for the Yardbirds, that was actually really difficult to determine everything because their whole album sheet is so weird with live albums and different coagulations of band members.
Right.
But we chose the albums For Your Love, and then Yardbirds, a.k.a. Roger the Engineer, and then an album called Birdland.
Which came out in 2003, I believe. Right?
Yes.
And features guitar solos from an array of other
famous
famous musicians. Yeah, right. But almost all songs that they had already recorded with a handful of new ones.
Mostly. And we'll talk more in depth about that because I have things to say.
Yeah, I'm sure you do.
So going into For Your Love, I started off by saying the title track is just weird. It's just weird. I don't love it.
I like it.
I didn't love it.
It's probably their biggest song. I mean, let's say right now, For Your Love is probably the most famous song that the Yardbirds ever put out.
I mean, I liked Under Sideways.
That's their second most popular song, and
Yeah.
I also like that one more. But I do think that For Your Love is probably their most
Possibly.
commercially well-known song.
I'm not going to disagree with you. I'm just going to say that I personally did not like it.
Fair enough.
It felt really... I will say that I listened to the original, and then I listened again when it was remastered in, I think, 2015.
Okay.
And I really preferred the remaster. So maybe I'm just not liking whatever the mixer did, whatever the producer did.
Right.
But it just felt really weirdly done to me.
Fair enough.
And I didn't love the harmonies, but I loved them in the remaster. So if it was the same vocals, then it was all the producer.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, I'm gonna be honest with everybody here. I had absolutely no idea who these guys were.
Yeah. Okay.
That's fair. I can understand
Yeah.
that.
I'll tell you what about For Your Love. Obviously, the title track, regardless of how you feel about it, I think is arguably one of their biggest or second biggest song. A couple of the lesser known ones on here that I liked were I Ain't Got You.
Right.
I thought that was a pretty solid song, and I Ain't Done Wrong. I
Okay.
think those were two of the other strongest songs on this album that I had otherwise not heard until I listened to this one. But like, you're hearing a lot. It's a blues rock band.
Yes.
And For Your Love is the only song that's not blues rock on this album.
Yeah.
And so Eric Clapton hated that so much that he left the band because of the song For Your Love. He's like, if this is the direction we're going in, I'm leaving.
Which I agree.
Yeah, fair enough.
Really did not enjoy that song. Some of the other things that I had to say, I took notes. I didn't take notes on every song because we'd be here forever. Wish You Would, I thought was probably the strongest song I felt on the track. It felt really strong. It had like a good mix of guitar and vocals in it. I thought a lot of the vocals in this one were forced, is what it felt like to me.
Yeah, Keith Relf is not the greatest singer.
Yeah.
I would agree with you there.
I did like Good Morning Little Schoolgirl.
Which is a classic old blues tune.
Right, and you actually got to like hear a lot of guitar, what I felt like for the first time on the album.
Yeah.
And considering they're a group known for guitar, like they have three huge guitarists. So, also, I think, Nick, we should talk about what I think is horrendous cover of Hang on Sloopy.
Yeah.
Called My Girl Sloopy.
Yeah, that was so
So
bizarre.
I saw Sloopy and I'm like, oh my gosh, because for those of you who don't know, us
Sloopy
as a cover band have done Hang on Sloopy by the McCoys.
Right. And where else would you ever see the word Sloopy?
Yeah,
if not
so I was like, wait,
song?
Is that the same song, but it's just a different title? And I put it on, and as I'm listening to it, I just got so sad.
Yeah.
I'm like, I can't believe what they've done to Sloopy.
That's not going to be the first time we're sad about covers in today's episode. But I will say, like, just last word on this album, unless Tyler wants to throw anything else on there, is Keith Relf wrote I Ain't Done Wrong. Did these guys even write any of these other songs? I really think that they are almost all exclusively covers, right?
They definitely didn't write Hang on Sloopy.
Well, obviously, right? But this is an album that's mostly just consisted of covering other old blues songs.
Right. Which, honestly...
And then For Your Love was obviously like a new hit for them, but it wasn't written by them. It was written for them.
Let's go ahead and move on to Roger the Engineer, a.k.a. the Yardbirds, whatever you want to call it. It's more commonly known as Roger the Engineer.
Yes. I mean, the best-selling album for a reason, in my opinion. I think this one was definitely the best. Over, Under, Sideways, Down.
Agree.
What we agreed was like their other really big hit. The song that was like a secret, I love this, that I never had heard before coming into this. The Nas Are Blue, I thought was just such a cool guitar riff into a walk-down thing that was really nice.
I purposely didn't write a note on the Nas Are Blue on this album because I wrote one for Birdland.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah,
and
it is
I have
both.
things to say.
Okay, fair enough. I like that song a lot, and the other one that sticks out to me, like the major ones to go listen to if you're interested, Jeff's Boogie. All
I was about to say Jeff's
Beck,
Boogie.
Jeff Beck just destroys the guitar on that one. It's just 2.5 minutes of Jeff Beck playing awesome stuff.
Yeah, that's where I think that's like, honestly, for me, the first song where it's like, oh, so these are like all-time great guitarists.
Yeah, right.
Interestingly done.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say, listening to their first album, it just felt like very 60s psychedelic stuff. So, like, just hearing it, it wasn't that I didn't like it, but it seemed to just sort of have that, like, very almost dated sound to it.
Mm.
I liked this album way more.
Yeah, way more.
There was just more to hear. The guitars were, like you were saying, like the guitars are great. I mean, I'll be honest, this is the one that I got really confused when we started talking about the first album, because genuinely I listened to that and I had no interest in really kind of going back to that.
Right.
So I was all ready to talk about this one, and that's why, like, as you guys were talking, I'm starting to panic because I'm like, I don't remember any of it, because it was really just, I don't know, it just kind of sounded like generic 60s background noise.
Sure.
Yeah.
And nothing really stood out. And going back to this one now, I'm like remembering like this is where I wanted to start with the
Yeah,
Yardbirds.
right.
I was like, yeah, they had like it. They're definitely it's definitely a 60s rock band, but it doesn't have that dated feel like their first album
Sure.
did.
Yes.
This one has almost like a nostalgic, like I'd love to go back to that, whereas the first one is almost like, oh, I don't.
Yeah,
want to.
the word that came to mind when I was trying to find one to describe the Yardbirds was formulaic.
Fair enough.
It was like, oh, we assemble these instrumentalists and we give them these songs to play and fame. And
Right.
that's what it felt like. It felt like there wasn't much experimentation in the beginning. A little bit more in this album. I really liked the beginning of Rack My Mind. When it had that like kind of groovy like drum and like the bass in the and then it picked up and he started singing and I said never mind.
Yeah. Yeah, now I hear you.
But definitely the beginning of it.
I would say the first two albums also sort of have that like this was recorded in somebody's garage type like noisiness to it.
Very true.
And that can be really good or really bad, and Roger the Engineer was how it's good, and For Your Love was how it's not nearly as good.
Yeah, totally.
So
moving on to Birdland. Why?
yeah, that's a
that's
great
all
question.
I have to say.
We're going to be
Why
trying to figure it
did
out.
Birdland happen? I'm not really sure. It felt like it didn't need to be done.
Yeah, I mean it's almost all songs that they had previously recorded.
Yeah, I will
like a lot of
say
their biggest hits.
I will say, because of this cover, I'm going to walk back my opinion on For Your Love.
Okay.
It was the only song on the album I thought was better than the original Yardbirds did it. The vocals were better. They definitely paid a lot of attention to the harmonies.
Sure.
And that's basically all I had on that.
Yeah, fair enough. And it was
other
just
than
like
that,
a lot.
yeah.
The funny thing to me was that it's an album where they cover themselves covering other people. It's like the Yardbirds already didn't write a lot of these songs that they did.
Right.
And then, so they released a cover of a song in 1965, for instance. And then in 2003, they covered themselves covering that song, and they almost changed nothing. Like, in terms of structure,
Really, yeah.
note for note, these songs are almost exactly the same.
And the things that they did change, I thought were almost exclusively for the worst.
Yeah.
With the exception of For Your Love, like we were talking about earlier, the Naz or Blue.
Yeah.
I thought that they used way too much distortion and tried to make it too hardcore of a song.
Sure.
Like, I really enjoyed the, like, you know, clean guitar, like,
Yeah.
that, like, polished sound from the original. And then it was like, let's make it, like, a hard rock cover. And I said, why did you do that?
Yeah, and then there were a couple of songs that were not covers that were on this that I was
I don't wanna
confused
talk
by.
about them.
Like, there was a song called My Blind Knife, which I just wrote Vocal Nightmare as my
Yeah.
note on that song. And then there's another one, Mr. Saboteur. It's the same riff that goes dun dun, and then it changes. Like, it's gonna be Satisfaction by the Rolling Stones over and over and over again, and then they change and do something slightly different. It's like just like Satisfaction had been out for 40 years. These guys knew the Rolling Stones. How did that not?
Yeah, I don't
How
know.
did they not hear that?
What do you think, Tyler, about Birdland?
I didn't even have access to Birdland through my
Probably for the
music
best.
subscription service. So I went online and looked it up.
Oh yeah.
And when I saw that it was covers, I just assumed that it was a cover album. I didn't realize, like, what I mean, but I mean not covers. I mean when I saw that it was just the same songs that they put out before.
You thought it was just a compilation?
Yeah, I just assumed it was a compilation. I didn't even realize. I didn't even go the next step and realize they were doing anything different
Sure.
with it. That's why I was like, oh, this was just a compilation album. So I just took that one and didn't do anything with it.
Okay.
That's fair. No,
Fair
that's totally fair. Let's get into scores.
we gotta grade 'em.
For the Yardbirds.
The cultural impact, I almost feel like they had a few songs that were big hits at the time, like For Your Love, like Over, Under, Sideways, Down, Shapes of Things. It's almost like the name The Yardbirds is more famous in culture than any of their actual music is. Like, the Yardbirds are known as a thing because they were this early blues rock band that spawned Clapton, that spawned Beck,
they
and
were
spawned Page.
a stepping stone.
Yeah. So I do think most of their cultural impact has nothing to do with, like, people knowing their actual songs.
I don't think... I'm going to tell you right now, I bet you if you said name a Yardbird song to like 100 people, less than 20 of them would know a Yardbird song.
And most of those people would say For Your Love.
Yeah, and the other ones would name like other Eric Clapton songs and be like,
right, sure.
Did the Yardbirds do Sunshine of Your Love? Is that Yardbird?
Yeah, like as the music novice of the three of you, the Yardbirds were not even close to being on my radar. I had never even heard of this band, and listening to their music, I didn't recognize a single one of their songs. I mean, that's not to say that I didn't enjoy some of their songs,
sure.
But none of these, like when we covered Oasis and Van Morrison, those were two groups that I didn't exactly know about. I might have heard the name, but I wouldn't have been able to tell you any songs or really recognize it. But like listening to their songs, there were songs like I've definitely heard this. I just never, attached it to those artists. This it was going down a rabbit hole unknowns. Like I had never heard any of these before. I mean, obviously the ones that were covers I had heard by other people, but the ones that were theirs, I had no idea.
Fair enough.
Just to give a number,
I
would say because I feel like people might have heard of them,
right?
I would give them like maybe a little over a 5, slightly above average. I don't think any more than that.
Yeah, I think like maybe like a 5.1 or a 5.2, just because they're so famous for having all these famous musicians.
Yeah, but I think that's X Factor. I think
you're not wrong.
The B3
you're not wrong, but that's what gave the Yardbirds a name. That's why people have heard of them. Like that's why.
Right, I'm okay with a 5.1. I'm definitely.
I think that's fair.
I would probably give them a 5, just because again I had no idea who they were. But, going onto the music store and seeing that, they had an album come out in 2019. I mean, granted, it was live at the BBC Revisited.
Okay.
So it wasn't anything new, but you don't put out a revisited album for a band that nobody's interested in anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, and there's clearly, you can always tell if a musical group is kind of like important or not based on like when you go to any kind of online music store. If they have a section for the artist and it's just their albums and nothing else, it doesn't necessarily mean you're a bad artist, but it means you're not exactly like well known.
Okay,
like
fair enough.
You open up the Yardbirds and you don't only get a list of their albums, but they actually have an image of them on the top of the page.
Right.
They actually have, essential artist playlists, which again is not something you bother doing for a band that's completely unknown.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I'm okay with a 5.
Yeah, 5.1 is good. And I think for breadth of work, it's so confusing because, like we said, like for as long as they've been together, so few studio albums, so many live albums mixed in with that. Like so much live and anthology. Like there are way more live and anthology albums than there are studio.
Here's what I'm going to say. Now, you feel free to,
go for it.
Disagree. I think the last album they released is the most telling for their breadth of work. On their most recent album, which was Birdland, it was all covers.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point.
And covers of covers, so I think their breadth of work needs to be low.
I don't think it needs to be low, because considering that they've put out multiple albums over several decades, a lot of it is live, so that's probably also the same songs rehashed.
Right. I mean, I'm thinking, again, 5.
I would be right in step with
I
you
would think
with
literally
5.
5.
Yeah, that's exactly where I'm at.
I almost forgot to mention something that I found that this was like completely unique to the Yardbirds, because I personally haven't seen this for any other artist. I might see it more as we do these episodes. I happen to use Apple Music, not a plug. That's just the one that I use. And Apple Music actually has a list of playlists for the Yardbirds, but they also have a playlist, and again, I've never seen this before, called Inspired by the Yardbirds. So if you're actually like a fan of the Yardbirds, this was actually an interesting thing to go down through, because I, just out of curiosity, I listened to it. The only takeaway from it that I actually added to my music library that wasn't there before was a song called Journey to the Center of the Mind by the I know I'm going to mess this up.
Amboy Dukes.
Amboy, yeah, there you go.
Interesting.
I
Okay, I'm not
kept
familiar.
wanting to add extra vowels and syllables to that. That I really, really liked. I mean, again, the rest of them weren't bad, but that was...
Also, shout out to Gold on the Ceiling by the Black Keys.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I mean, they're not bad, but
No.
it was like, that was just an interesting thing for me to go through, like,
Yeah, that's cool.
tracks that were explicitly inspired by a band.
Yeah, no, that's
something
very
you
interesting.
hardly ever see.
Right.
So
That's a good point.
I think Breath of Work, I'm okay with a 5.
5,
even.
I agree. Instrumental talent is where they're going to have their best.
Yeah,
That's
you
their
gotta
best.
go.
It's got to be high because they've got 3 of the greatest
here's what I'm
guitarists
gonna
of all
say.
time.
Again, my mental process.
Yeah, please.
I would be like 8.5. And then I might subtract half a point for the lead singer of the original Yardbirds.
Yeah.
Because that's an instrument, that's part of it.
Yeah, you're not
They
wrong.
don't do
You're not
anything
wrong.
inspiring on drums, as far as I can tell.
No, it's and
It's
like
mostly
you mentioned
guitar.
before, like a lot of their album tracks themselves, they like don't show off how good Eric and Jeff and Jimmy are
At
like,
all. It's like
you're
ridiculous.
Right. You're right. Like there's songs where they do, but there's a lot of songs where it's like, why isn't there more guitar?
It's
You've
just so
got these
interesting
great
for us.
players.
Also, I will say, especially for Your Love,
Yeah.
the songs were so short.
Well, that's
like
what
2
everything
minutes-
was.
2 minutes and 15
Everything
seconds?
was like that in
There
the
was one
radio
that was
in
like
the mid,
2 minutes and 3 seconds.
in the
That's
early to mid
super low,
'60s. Like
so
that's
short though.
they were just trying to churn out as many of those 2-minute radio hits as they could.
I guess. I
And
mean,
that
that's
was the
probably
culture.
true, but
And that's also like that's somebody
mean
in
I
the
have to like
studio
it.
writing the songs for them and telling them that this is what you need for a hit single. But yeah, I think
Fair.
8 is fine. It's taken away a little bit for the vocals and
Yeah, I
the
think
lack
8
of use of their great talent.
and I mean, I'm just gonna jump right in. Unless you have something to say, Tyler. You don't really talk about instrumental.
I couldn't talk about instrumental.
Fair enough.
So right
I know
into
what you're gonna say.
songwriting and poetic combined, they don't
They
write
don't
the
write
songs.
the songs. They don't write the songs.
They don't
You're
write
right.
the songs at all. And I'm sorry, but that's got to be like, I would say,
Yeah, there's a few songs that they wrote.
yeah, and I
over
didn't
all
love
of
them.
them.
I listened
No.
specifically for the ones that they wrote, and I didn't love them, especially on that last album, Birdland.
Yeah.
I did not like
agree.
at all the original songs
Right.
on that.
I liked I Ain't Done Wrong, like I mentioned, from For Your Love, which is one
Yeah.
that Ralph wrote, but that's the only one that they wrote on that
right.
album.
So I mean, listen, I'm in like the 2 range.
I think that's
I'm in like the 2 range for both songwriting and poetic.
I think that makes a ton of sense because again, they're
I
not
might
just
be
not
willing to go.
writing
I might
these
be willing to go
songs.
3 range because I have to assume that Jeff Beck wrote Jeff's Boogie.
True. Okay, so
So I'd be willing to give him a point for songwriting.
You're right. In terms
just
of,
for that song, which is very interestingly done.
Yeah, I would say like a lot of at least in terms of the guitar arrangements.
Yeah.
that's something that Eric and Jeff and Jimmy did.
So maybe we give them 3, 3, 5,
I'm okay
assuming
with,
they wrote their own guitar parts.
I'm okay with the 3/5 if they wrote their own guitar parts, which is overwhelmingly likely, I think.
Yes.
And then
but
poetic
poetic
talent
talent,
is
2,
at
if
2 at the
that.
best. Yeah, I mean, I'm okay with since we went high on songwriting, I could
Yeah.
do a 1.5 for poetic talent because really, I mean, if you're not writing the songs, you're
Yeah,
not writing the poems
exactly.
most of the time. And then that brings us to X Factor, and that's the Yardbirds' bread and butter. It's like the fact that they spawned
Yeah.
the career of the 3 great guitarists is why people know who they are. I do
And-
think they deserve at least something in X Factor.
Yeah, I'm willing to say
Mm-hmm.
probably 2.5 points.
I was thinking exactly where you're at.
Yeah.
I'm going to go ahead and give them a 2 unless Tyler has a stronger feeling.
Again, this is like a category that I didn't really know how to score them because I'm not a big music person.
Fair
so-
enough.
yeah, but you've heard of Eric
I mean,
Clapton.
yeah,
I
everybody.
know
Eric
that I've heard
Clapton,
of
Jimmy
Eric
Page
Clapton,
from Led
but
Zeppelin.
I know, but like
Yeah.
for me, I knew about them
Mhm.
with no knowledge of the Yardbirds.
Gotcha.
So I don't necessarily
Right.
know that they wouldn't have become something if this band didn't happen. Because for all I knew about music, this was not even a band. So
That's
I don't know.
fair enough.
So I'm comfortable with you guys with scoring close with you guys
All right.
on that one, just because
Sure.
I
Works
just
for me.
I really don't
Okay.
have an
Yeah,
opinion
so
on that. I'm sorry.
Let's just jump to Gary, Indiana, and start talking
Right
about the
on
Jackson
into
5.
The Jackson 5. Also the
Yeah.
Jacksons, right? We did
Also
decide-
the Jacksons, yes. So
Okay.
they did change their name from the Jacksons 5 to the Jacksons when they changed record labels and left Motown.
Well, it's also because Jermaine left.
and yeah, that's right.
Which I know everybody thinks, oh, one of the Jacksons left. That's why they changed from 5. It
Right.
had to be Michael. Nope, it
Nope,
was Jermaine.
It was Jermaine. You're right.
Okay, so I'll say my little blurb.
Go for it.
The Jackson 5 and the Jacksons were an American pop band that were made up of, obviously, the Jackson family, most notably Michael. They were active from 1965 up till 1989, then again in 2001, then again from 2012 to the present.
Oh, interesting.
That is the ages of the Jacksons.
And over that time, they've put out 16 studio albums between
Yeah.
the Jackson 5 and the Jacksons.
Yep, and they are arguably one of the best-selling bands of all time, over 100 million worldwide records.
Oh, wow.
Which you wouldn't think,
I did not realize that. No,
because they're
that's
not
good to
including
know.
Michael Jackson's records in there.
Sure, right.
So for this podcast, I might have listened to something extra,
Okay.
because did we listen to?
So Diana Ross Presents
Yeah.
the Jackson 5 was their first album.
Correct, that's when we listened to.
Right.
I also listened to ABC.
Yes, we listened to ABC.
Yeah.
That was their most popular.
Right, but according to sales thresholds, it was not.
Fair enough.
According to ABC was their most popular, like today, but sales thresholds had Looking Through the Windows as their most popular. So I listened to both,
Right, okay. And then we also listened to Victory by
which was the Jacksons, and their overall best-selling album was
Yes.
Victory. It went double platinum in the U.S.
for reasons that I can't comprehend.
We will discuss. So going right in, from the very beginning, Diana Ross Presents the Jackson 5.
Okay.
What do you think, Tyler? You go first, Tyler.
Yeah, please. I want to hear from Tyler on this one.
I will say this. I know and understand how important the Jackson 5 were for the music industry,
Yeah.
but this is quite honestly a genre of music that I am not that openly fond of.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
That said, for a style and genre of music that I'm not that interested in, I didn't have the worst time listening through the Jackson
Yeah.
5.
Mm.
I can't say that they're not talented. They're quite clearly talented, and there is some vocal performances in here that are, phenomenal.
Right.
But
Yeah.
this early kind of pop style, it just does not really speak to me.
Yeah.
So
Fair
that's gonna, so I'm trying to stay kind of like objective as I listened through. I mean, honestly, the songs that everybody knows, I have sort of like a negative feeling for because they are so overplayed.
Okay.
I mean,
fair.
Oh, baby, give me one more chance.
I love that song.
I mean, there's that. There's also, I Saw Mommy Kissing Santa Claus.
yeah,
Their
yeah,
version
yeah.
of
We don't
that
have to go into the
gets
Christmas music.
gets played to
So-
death over the holidays. I can respect them for being
Right.
able to totally hit that point that the public went, yeah, we like it, but I also just can't stand the fact
Yeah.
that everyone has just kind of been so obnoxious
Gotcha.
with the Jackson 5. Maybe if I heard a little bit more I mean, that is one thing I will definitely say that I liked about doing this was for the first time ever I was listening to the Jackson 5 and it wasn't the same 5 songs I already knew.
Fair enough.
Which is interesting to me.
Yeah.
As far as Diana Ross Presents the Jacksons, the only thing I have to say about this is like, it was okay album. I mean, a few different covers on it.
I mean,
Michael's really young in it, like
Yeah.
really young. I Want You Back is the popular one from this
And I
album.
think their best song. Honestly, I think it's their best song.
Overall or on the album?
Overall.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's my favorite.
I would
Jackson 5
disagree.
Song,
I
hands
do
down.
really enjoy the song, but I might disagree on the best overall.
I don't know why they bothered to do a cover of a Disney song as the opener. Zippity Doo Dah. Like,
Yeah, why not?
I thought that was bizarre.
You got Michael Jackson wailing on the zip.
Yeah, it was just weird.
I
And-
mean, I'll be honest again, because I'm so familiar with I Want You Back, I actually really enjoyed Zippity Doo Dah.
fascinating.
I get it.
Oh, and I also kind of feel like that's probably the only way to even hear the song Zippity Doo Dah anymore. 'Cause
Interesting.
Very true.
Disney has done their best to completely bury. I mean, and
Not without reason.
not without
Okay, yeah,
reason.
right.
Like I'm not saying that they're right or wrong in doing
Yeah,
this, but it's
Jackson 5 cover of Zippity Doo-Dah may survive the times.
Fair
Yeah.
You know what should never survive? Their cover of My Sharia Moore. Because
Please,
when
I
I
wasn't
heard
gonna
that,
bring it up.
when I heard that, I was like, "Oh, this reminds me of why I like every single other R&B artist from the '70s better
Yeah.
than this."
Okay.
I
Before we
wish
get
I
too
was
heated,
Stevie
let's
Wonder.
move on to ABC. Real quick about ABC. My big feeling for ABC, I thought two things. One, oh my gosh, it's the song ABC.
Right.
That's pretty much it. And then also, it really just felt like, and I got this vibe for the next album as well. Michael Jackson was just too young to be singing the lyrics he was singing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
I
you know
agree.
what? You know what I got? I got a really like, and I don't mean this in terms of their popularity or their talent. I got a really like early Justin Bieber vibe.
Sure.
Because Justin Bieber, when he first hit the scene, was like singing songs about like loving adult women.
Yeah.
And he was like 12.
Sure. Right.
Like
I
Michael
totally
Jackson
hear
was super young, and he's like, "How do I get you to love me?" And it's like,
Right.
well, okay,
ya. Okay. Come on,
it's
Michael.
weird.
Calm
It
down.
felt weird. If like his voice was so high pitched,
Yeah.
it was weird. It sounded good,
Sure.
weirdly
Yeah.
written.
He could always.
You know,
sing,
it's
but...
it's funny. It's funny that you bring that up because that might be the reason why I was never that into the Jackson 5. Because I'm one of those people that like I listen to the lyrics of a song.
Yeah.
If you put out a song that is about something that I don't like or is about something that I feel like is inappropriate or not something that I would like actively engage in or something like that, and you make it like a fun, engaging song, I'm not gonna like it. Like if you make a song about committing like terrible acts of violence towards somebody, but you make it fun, I'm gonna be the only one that goes, "Oh, this song is messed up." I do not want to be, and that's sort of like Pat, like what you were saying, it hits your ear really weird,
Really
to
really
hear
weird.
a young child singing about these
Fair
deep,
point.
loving emotions to women,
Yeah.
and stuff like that. Because when you initially hear the Jackson 5, like to me, and I guess it's just because of how I grew up and the way music is done nowadays, but they sound like a children's band.
Yeah.
Like I don't know if that's just the sound that became popular in children's music down the line or what, but like when the Jackson
They're the first
5
Kids Bop, honestly.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
like,
They're
when-
mostly covers done by mostly children.
Yep.
Because like the one song that really set me off to thinking about the lyrics was "Don't Know Why I Love You," which, if you don't know, is a very popular Stevie Wonder song that the Jackson 5 covered, and
Right.
most of them are covers.
Right. Again, 2 albums full of a lot of covers.
And it was weird to hear like a 12-year-old boy singing them.
Right. And some of them are done decently, and some of them are just bad.
Yeah.
Did anything even on this album stick out to you before we go? Because like I didn't like hate the songs as we were going through, but like there wasn't a song where I
I'll
was like,
bet
oh
you-
wow, okay, that one I really.
I'll
liked.
bet you felt like kind of groovy. That's all
Okay.
I have. I had that song was kind of vibing.
Right. Yeah. For
That's
the most part, that
basically it.
album like was every song was pretty forgettable,
I mean,
except for the title
Yeah.
track, which is just ingrained in culture.
as much as I talk about not liking this kind of music, I want to be clear, like I wouldn't actively turn it off.
Sure.
It's not that kind of dislike. It's just
Yeah.
not something that I would actively pick to listen to.
Yeah.
I mean, all of this would be fine to like set the tone for a decade, or like if you're doing like a themed
Yeah.
dance
Mhm.
or whatnot, and this stuff is on, I'm not going to be annoyed that what we're doing like an early's R&B themed prom, and you're playing the Jackson 5. What's wrong with
No,
you?
I get it.
Like I totally get that this is just not the music that I grew up with.
Yeah.
Right.
But
I will say,
Right, and I love R&B music, like all the other
Yeah,
artists from
yeah,
this
you're
time. This
very
is
familiar
such a
with it.
disappointment for
Oh,
me compared
yeah.
to Stevie Wonder and
I
Bill
know.
Withers
Oh,
and
yeah.
Earth,
Trust
Wind,
me,
and Fire. Like,
I know. Let's move on to looking through the windows real quick, because I don't have much to say about it
Go for
before
it.
we get to the last 2 albums. Because I did also listen to the last Jackson 5 album, Moving Violation.
Oh, interesting.
I want to just say like a quick blurb before we get to Victory.
Another
Looking through the windows,
lot of covers that aren't.
lot of covers. I have notes on a couple songs. Ain't Nothing Like the Real Thing, which is a cover,
Right.
obviously. Marvin Gaye,
Right.
cover.
Another person who I'm disappointed we weren't listening to
Yes,
instead.
yes. We will get to him though.
I know.
We'll be rewarded for
Yes,
our patience.
Exactly.
I thought it was a good song overall. Again, unoriginal compared to the original. Like there was nothing done, and I thought that this is one of the few times where MJ felt really belty. Like a kid shouldn't be singing this because it made him have to yell.
Yeah.
Because it was too high.
Right.
Itty Bitty Pretty One or Little Bitty Pretty One.
Right. Another great song originally.
Yeah, just a cut. I mean, that one was the most that just felt like, meh, it's a cover of that song. Nothing was better.
Sure.
Nothing was worse, but nothing was better.
Sure.
And why do it then? And then the only other thing I said, Doctor My Eyes, which is another cover.
I love the Jackson Brown song, Dr. My Eyes.
Yes,
It's
I
great.
thought that one was a really good vocal from Michael Jackson.
Fair enough.
That was the only one on the album where I was like, wow, that compares to the original.
Fair point.
I have nothing else to say about looking through the windows.
So
if
let's
either of you have anything to
switch
say.
to the Jacksons. I want to just get on. So here's what's different when we get to this Jacksons album compared to the other three. The Jackson
It's
kids are
awful?
now writing them. They're now writing the songs,
And it's awful.
and it's I hated every song. I will tell you this: this album sounded to me way. If somebody said, "Hey, look, I've got this demo tape of the Backstreet Boys," before I had heard the Backstreet Boys, I would have been like, "Oh yeah, that's what a '90s NSYNC Backstreet Boys boy band sounds like."
So
and it's
I
not
literally
good,
have
ever.
Victory, the Jacksons, so bad, circled
So
100
bad.
times.
Yeah, terrible.
I'll give you
hated
some
it.
individual notes, but Tyler, what are your thoughts?
So, I don't know why.
Don't tell me you liked it.
I don't know why you guys are surprised. Track 1 is called Torture.
Yeah, and the rest
my
of the
note-
album was.
My note next to Torture is yes, it is.
Yes, it is. Right.
There is one song on this album that I like, and it's 100% ironically like, and that is
State of Shock.
Yeah.
State of Shock.
Also, why Mick Jagger?
So here are my notes. I have a couple notes. Song wise, I have Torture. Yes, it is Torture.
Mm-hmm.
State of Shock. I said, oh, Mick, why?
Yeah,
Dislike. Not
terrible.
good. We Can Change the World. I had as almost okay. And the only song on the entire album that I liked because it was such a refreshing change from the rest of the garbage was Be Not
I
Always.
knew you were gonna say that because that's just like
that
Michael singing.
nice
Yeah.
acoustic. Michael Jackson wrote it and performed it, and it was like, wow.
And
I get
also,
why you're the
there's
one that got famous, man. After
such
that,
a difference in Michael's voice from like when he could sing as a kid, but like him knowing how to sing.
the emotion in
as
his voice was super different.
Right, it was totally different, and it was much better.
Yeah, so
in
that,
that sense.
was the only song
I agree.
that might have like actually redeemed
Mm-hmm.
the fact that I feel like I didn't waste my time listening to it.
Yeah, I'd say let's just get right to it. The cultural impact, I think, similar to the Yardbirds in a lot of ways. The Jackson 5, while they have
Way
two
more
or
people
three
know who the
hits,
Jackson 5
well,
are.
but no one can name more than like 3 Jackson 5
No,
songs.
but so many more
Yeah,
people.
But I'm
the
saying they're
difference is
most
they can
famous
name them.
because Michael Jackson.
But agreed. But I think there's
Yes.
more of a cultural impact because if I walk up to, again, 100 people on the street and I say, "Hey, sing 5 seconds of a Jackson 5 song,"
Sure.
everyone's gonna go ABC,
Right.
and
You're
they're gonna
not
know
wrong.
what it is.
You're not wrong. But again, not as big. Like they're a name, and you're like, "Oh yeah, the Jackson 5, that's band," and then you realize, "Oh yeah, they only have 3 songs."
Right, but I think they're like at least at a 6.
Really?
I would.
I think
would,
just that
yeah,
song.
I would agree with Pat. I mean,
I was in above 5, but not that much.
no, I definitely I have to give him a lot because like you know, we're saying that we only know 3 songs, but that's still a breadth of work that everybody remembers. And you're saying it's because of Michael Jackson, but no, there are loads and loads of people who know the Jackson 5 and don't know that Michael was a part of it. Because there are a lot of
just
people.
the cultural impact of that Pepsi commercial.
Well, there are a lot of people. There are a lot of people that I've spoken to about music. We've gotten onto the subject in conversations, and then obviously we'll talk about music from the '80s, and Michael Jackson will come up,
Sure.
and you'll say something like, "Yeah, it's crazy that he started like as a little kid, the Jackson 5," and they'll be like, "What?"
That's
Like,
wild.
I've had
never
that
met anyone who
conversation.
didn't know
Like
that.
Yeah.
people in the know, like people who are big music
Yeah.
connoisseurs and stuff
Right.
like that, they follow the artist and they get
Okay.
it. People who are just like genuinely, sorry, not genuinely, generally a fan of Michael Jackson, didn't necessarily research his life, his breadth of work, his growing up and stuff like that. They just know they like Michael Jackson. They know Thriller's
All
a
right.
great album.
Right.
They don't necessarily know that he came
Yeah.
from that.
Okay, I'm okay with a 6 then.
Yeah, I think a
mean,
6 just for those other factors.
I'm all right with it.
If we want to move in real quick to Breath of Work, because I
Yes.
kind of want to push because I want to have time to talk about the last.
I agree. I
act.
want to spend lots of time with them.
Not that I mean, I feel like we gave the Jackson and the Jackson.
We
5
talked about them
lot.
quite a bit, but
Breath of Work.
there were
Again,
a lot of albums.
It's all covers. It's all
covers, and
I
most
think,
of them aren't that good.
And I honestly
Even
would
the
be
good ones are,
totally
like, okay.
comfortable with like a 3.
Yeah, because
I think it's significantly below average because they just got famous.
Sure.
They
and
got famous
other people
because
wrote their songs. Like,
yeah.
The Corporation is credited as writing a lot of their songs.
them.
Barry Gordy is credited with writing a lot of songs, and then other ones are just
and then
kind of...
were other famous
and
Motown singers.
Yeah,
there
right.
are
Exactly.
there are
Covers.
plenty of artists who have become popular doing covers, and their covers have become the definitive version of the songs. And I do not think that is the case with the Jackson 5.
I mean,
They're
Eat
no
It by
Beatles.
Weird Al Yankovic is
They're
way
no
more famous
Beatles.
than Beat It.
Instrumental talent, they can all sing. Like they can all sing well. Michael's
You
not...
guys need to react more than just making
Sorry.
faces
I'm
at
sorry.
me when I say things like that. The audience can't see your faces.
I know.
I just don't. I never in my life did I ever think I would hear Pat O'Leary go, "Eat It" by Weird Al Yankovic
which I've
is
never
more
even...
popular than "Beat It" by Michael
Which I
Jackson.
don't agree with,
know it
but I just
exists.
did it to get a
Just-
reaction.
Yeah.
That is so incorrect.
Yes.
I don't think it merited a response.
That's
I
fair.
mean, and this is coming from a guy whose only experience with music concerts was seeing Weird Al Yankovic live
God.
2 times, and even I know that his parody is not more popular than.
All right, where are we at on instrumental talent? Like I said, I think they're all good singers. Michael doesn't. He gets really good as an adult. He could always sing, but he's much better as in the Jacksons. as a singer.
I don't think that we should give the Jackson 5 any points for talent based on what Michael did on his own.
Agreed.
Sure, but I'm saying that
'cause we will do
with
Michael Jackson.
the Jacksons, he was much better as a vocalist.
So I personally am thinking
the music was worse.
like
to be
5.1.
clear. Okay.
I think because honestly, like all of the Jacksons at some point sing a little bit in the stuff.
Yeah.
You've heard them all. They are significantly worse.
Well, sure. Yeah.
Like except for
but,
Jermaine is not bad.
Right.
Jermaine's
Yeah, but-
a good singer.
Yes.
I'll
Except
also
for Maestria Moore.
I'll also say this though. When they hit the music scene, they all at least sounded like singers. They might not have been the best and you might not have liked them, but they sounded like singers. I have
would agree.
heard, like, nowadays it is so easy to become popular in the music industry if
Yeah.
you know the right people. There are plenty of people who got record deals and put out albums who
Yeah.
cannot even carry a note.
Yeah.
And I would not put them in the same category.
No,
as
that's
the
what I
other
mean. They're
members of the
average.
Jackson
They're
Five.
average.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Songwriting, they did.
Songwriting,
we
yeah.
discussed
I
this.
see your
They don't
one,
write
and
them.
I think a 1 fits.
I mean, what they don't write the songs when they did write them for Victory. They were all
Now-
terrible.
Now, poetic talent, I'm willing to give them over a 1.
But you're
for the
talking
songs that they
exclusively for the ones on Victory.
That Michael
because
Jackson
all
wrote.
the other ones they didn't write. And
Yeah,
only
and
the
I
ones
think
that,
because of Victory, and granted, there may be more Jackson's albums
Sure.
that Michael wrote more on,
there might be, yeah.
but I mean, just that song "Be Not Always" is worth a point.
okay, so you want to give him a 2?
I think a
instead of
2.
one,
I think a 2 because
I think
most
that's
of the
fair.
stuff they didn't write.
No.
And then the X Factor. Do we?
Is it Michael
so,
Jackson?
But
gives them
I
an
think
X
it's
factor?
part Michael Jackson, but I think also it's part like it is widely known like how ridiculous their father was.
Oh yeah.
And
yeah.
like stuff like that, like all of that stuff is very famous, and
Sure.
it's like
Yeah,
the epitome of what not to do now.
Yeah, you're right.
You definitely need to give them some points for X Factor
Yeah.
because I've been to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame
Mhm.
in Cleveland, and all around that museum is rock and roll. Like it's rock
Yeah.
and roll. And then they even have like this big amphitheater where you sit in and they show like this whole video about the history of rock and roll and everything. And the Jackson 5 show up. And I'm
Sure.
like,
Yeah.
Okay.
what is the Jackson 5 doing in my rock and roll
Yeah.
museum? But like
Right.
they're there.
All right, I want to
They
give him 2
have
extra points
impact.
for that stuff.
I think
Between
2
Michael
points-
and Joe, and
I
that
think
stuff.
2 points works because I'm looking at the other scores and I see what that did,
and it makes sense.
and I agree with it.
I agree with it too.
So
Okay.
let's move on to our last band.
which was,
And
for
objectively,
me,
I would assume the best one for me personally.
For me as well. They're definitely the best that we listened to this week.
And that's Alice in Chains. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a blurb about Alice in Chains, my standard blurb that I give. Alice in Chains is a rock band from Seattle. They're one of the Seattle grunge bands.
Right.
When you think of like
Nirvana,
the Seattle music scene in the
Pearl
90s,
Jam.
they are one of them. So they were formed in 1987. Their years active was until 2002, and then again in 2005 to the present. Obviously, we listened to 3 albums of theirs.
Mm-hmm.
We listened to 2 that were the quote-unquote original lineup, minus Mike Starr.
Sure.
He left before, and then the last album was their new singer. Not
Right,
Lane
after
Staley.
Lane Staley had passed.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's basically what I have to say about
All right, well,
that.
let's do the first album. Their very first album that they ever put out was Facelift.
Which was released in 1990.
Yeah,
It went double platinum.
And I think this really sets the tone for the band that they're going to be.
Oh, yeah.
Like my number one note on the
more.
whole album is it demonstrates the genius way that they put together Lane Staley and Jerry Cantrell's voices.
Yes.
I mean, the two of them singing together,
Yeah.
amazing. I love it.
I think that this album, ironically to me, like plays now as like more metal than grunge.
Interesting, yeah.
Listening to it, you definitely hear some grunge in some of the songs, but just how hardcore the playing is, I would be more consistently thinking of metal now.
Right. Although they're like towards the end, I Know Something About You is kind of almost like a bluesy or funkier song.
Yeah, they
too.
definitely had multiple sounds. Facelift for me was like the first time when I was like, oh, because the first song I ever heard by them is Man in the Box.
Sure, which is a great song.
Which is also my favorite song by them, Rooster being a close second, which
this
we'll get
is my
to.
like 5th or 6th favorite song by them, but a great song. I mean, Alice in Chains has a dearth of great songs.
Yes. Great use of the word dearth.
Thank you.
But I think Facelift it's arguably called like one of the best debut albums.
Sure, I can see that totally.
Because it just came on, it was so well done, it was so complete. It was for most of the bands that we've done so far, listening to the first album, you hear like this is the beginning and they'll improve. Like,
yeah.
For instance, for the Yardbirds, like the second album was significantly better that we listened to. Like you could hear growth. Facelift came out, was done. It was done. It was like, oh, this is Alice in Chains. This is what they sound like.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Not that they didn't get better, because I do think that their best-selling album of all time.
Yeah.
Like we're going to see some improvement, but like Facelift in and of itself is already an excellent piece.
Agreed. So Tyler, what do you think about Facelift?
So, I'll be the.
Yeah, I know you don't love them.
I'll be the elephant in the room. I do not like grunge music, but I like to see it performed live. I feel like I'm more entertained by the show, and I'm kind of, people are going to hate me for this, but I kind of lump grunge and heavy metal together.
Interesting. Yeah, I do hate you for that because I hate heavy metal music, but I love grunge.
It just hits my ears the same way.
I would just like to
Fair
say
enough.
that Tyler's opinion does not reflect the opinion of Low Totem as a whole.
That's true. We've made
He
that clear.
just
I think
is
we
our
made it
wardrobe
clear.
announcer.
Yeah. I think we
What
made
is
it
a
clear enough.
wardrobe announce?
You walk out on stage before we do our gigs and tell people what we're wearing.
Yeah, because they won't see it later.
Anyway, getting back to point.
Yeah.
I don't mean to offend anyone who is a fan of this genre of music or is a fan of Alice in Chains, but this whole album just sounded the same to me.
Interesting.
I
thought
understand.
It was yeah. Okay.
I understand where
From
he's
an
coming
outside
from
perspective,
an
yes.
outside perspective.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not the type of person that if I don't like a style or genre of music, I can't be in the room while it's being played.
Sure.
I don't need it shut off. I don't need to be aware. About the only kind of music that really gets me to grind my teeth is like children's preschool music. That's like the only time where I'm like, you need to turn off the Fisher Price music.
Yeah, okay, fair
we
enough.
can't do this. But I would not be able to tell you the difference between We Die Young and It Ain't Like That or any of the numbers on here.
Okay.
I'll tell you, I don't want to sound offensive here. If anyone, I don't mean this to be offensive. Right when I put this album on, I just felt like I was in a Hot Topic. That's not a bad thing, or that that's not a negative thing or a positive thing, but it just that is the only thing that I thought of when this was on, and I was like, this is just, to me, they might be like one of the first people to come out and do this genre of music and whatnot, but so many people have like taken over from that. Like I couldn't tell you the originator from the person who was influenced by it or anything like that. So like to me,
I mean, you can argue them, Nirvana, Pearl Jam.
Yeah. Nirvana,
Soundgarden at some point.
This is just music that I always
of grunge, but
they're all around.
These guys were very close. Yeah.
This is just music that I always associate with the obnoxious bully character from every 90s movie. This is the music from every quote unquote edgy horror film that was trying way too hard to be more than what it was. It just kind of
I think
epitomizes that.
I think before we get any further down that rabbit hole, let's move on to Dirt.
Dirt, phenomenal. I mean, I think it's hands down their best album. There are some spots on here that I'm not crazy about. Like Sick Man is not a good song to me, but it also has some of my favorite songs literally of all time. I think Rooster is one of the top 15 or 20 best songs ever written by anyone.
Is very high on my list as well. Great song.
Wood, Dirt, the title track, is also one of my favorite songs of all time. The first 4 songs, Them Bones, Damn That River, Rain When I Die, Down the Hole, I thought were all great.
Here's what I'm going to say about Dirt, the album. I think that this is just, especially now with everything that's happened since then, such a haunting tale of like the band's struggle with addiction.
Yeah.
Especially Lane Staley.
Sure, of course.
I mean, that's why I love Sick Man. Not because of the song itself. I agree with what you're saying in terms of the song quality.
Yeah.
But lyrically, like, you hear the struggle,
story.
And he's basically just telling everybody, like, in Sick Man and Junkhead, like, don't glorify this, don't be like this. And Lane had come out in interviews.
Yeah.
After this album was released and saying, like, the number one thing that, like, just breaks my heart is when people listen to this album and then come up and tell me that they're high when they see me. And it's like, then you missed the entire point of the album. The whole point of the album is don't do what I do.
Right.
Like, don't do it. I can't stop. You can.
Yeah.
Like, it's so heavy. Like, it's so heavy. And it's so well done. Like you're saying, like, Them Bones. I also love Down in a Hole.
Yeah,
I mean, Rooster,
song.
Obviously. Wood. Yep. Like, so well done. I would really argue that this might be the best overall album in the grunge era.
Of the grunge era, and I'm not even going to argue. I'll tell you right now, I think this has further confirmed the fact that of all of the grunge bands, Alice in Chains is my favorite.
I would agree.
More than Nirvana, more than Pearl Jam, more than Soundgarden. Alice in Chains is my favorite.
I think vocally Soundgarden wins just because
Chris Cornell's fantastic.
Chris Cornell's voice was stronger.
I love Lane Staley's voice, and I love Jerry
I'm just talking in terms
voice.
of pure vocal ability.
Sure.
And I think Lane Staley is second.
Yeah,
I think Lane Staley is a very close second. There. Yeah, Jerry Cantrell might be top 5, which is incredible for being the quote unquote backup singer.
Speaking of Lane's voice, and let's just take that to go to Rainier Fog.
Yeah, Rainier Fog.
Which
is we're not even going to give you opinion on Dirt because I'm not going to let you besmirch it, Tyler.
Without
you
Lane
can besmirch this album
and William Duvall as their. I think he does a fine job. He's not great.
As well.
He's not
Lane.
He's not Lane. No one was ever going to be Lane.
Well, and
I liked every song on this album. None of it hit me in the same way that the hits on Dirt and Facelift were like amazing to me. But I liked every song.
Yeah, here's the notes that I had for Rainier Fog, and then Tyler, I would like your opinion on this one.
Yes.
I thought it had a sentimental sound a little bit, but it was missing the hardness of.
Missing an edge is my note.
Exactly.
Note at the bottom.
And I think you could really hear when Lane Staley sang the songs, it was breaking him.
Yeah.
And I think that, it just, you don't feel that now in Rainier Fog. You don't hear it. Again, it was good. It felt really polished. You could really feel that they were missing Lane Staley's raspy vocal. Like it just felt too clean.
Sure.
For what Alice in Chains tries to be, especially since they also tried to sound like Alice in Chains.
Yes.
if they had like
Well, that's
reinvented
because
their
Jerry
sound.
is writing all the songs on
Jerry
every
is
album.
writing all the songs.
On
I
every
have
album,
nothing
really.
against Jerry
Yeah.
Cantrell at all. I think he's a great singer. I think he's a
great
great
songwriter.
musician. I think he's a great songwriter. But I definitely think that without Lane Staley, like Alice in Chains suffers as a whole.
I don't disagree with that.
So I mean, I'm not.
This
I'm
is
not,
where Tyler says this was his favorite one.
Yeah, right.
I'm not going to try to beat a dead horse here. If this is a style and genre of music that you're into, then you're good for you. If you can get kind of any kind of pleasure and enjoyment out of this, then power to you. I'm not
Right.
here to tell
Fair
you
enough.
that what you're listening to is
Oh,
bad.
of course.
I'm never going to say that.
Well, we have done that.
That was what we
in
did
previous,
with the
yeah.
NSYNC
And the
segment.
Jackson 5,
yeah,
pretty
right.
much. If you like them, you're wrong.
No, of course.
Well-
That's not how we feel.
I don't-
But
So I can sort of like listening to Nick and Pat talk about them and sort of going back and sampling some of the tracks while you guys were talking and listening to them again on on my headset and whatnot. I will say that of all of this genre music that I heard, they don't do it poorly.
Fair enough.
They do it well.
That is
Okay.
high praise from
Yeah, it
Tyler.
is.
And I also want to say again, I've obviously never seen a big group like Alice in Chains in concert,
Mhm.
but I have gone to live shows at bars and places like that where this genre
To
of
see your
music.
greatest cover band of all time, Low
Yeah,
Totem?
us. Alright.
You guys have never done this genre of music.
I have been begging to do Man in the Box. They
We
keep
almost
telling me,
did.
Pat, it's going to be too high for your voice. And I said, no.
Okay. First of all,
Remember that time we had a practice and I sang that song up like 4 steps?
I remember. And remember that one time when we did
for,
Rooster
but
and
for
then didn't do it?
I'm down to do Rooster
Yeah,
anytime.
okay.
But
Anyway.
for me, without the energy of the crowd and seeing the performers perform, this music loses all of its appeal to
Okay,
me.
fair enough.
I understand where you're
yeah.
coming from.
I would never put on any of their albums, just me in my house. I would have
Except
to,
for when you literally had to do that earlier
Well,
this
yeah.
week.
Right.
I this is definitely something that I would want to be with other people who are into this stuff and
Right, and then you
vibe
feed off
off
that
of how
emotion. I
much
get it.
they're
Okay.
enjoying it.
All right. Well,
Let's jump
just-
right in.
yes,
Cultural
let's get
impact
this-
high.
I don't think they're like as
They're
high
not
as some other
Nirvana
bands that we've looked at. Yeah,
In
they're
terms
not
of
Nirvana.
grunge.
They may not even be Pearl Jam in terms of grunge,
No,
in
but
terms
I
of
mean-
popularity, but they're probably like the third most famous grunge band.
I'm looking at the list of all of our previous rankings in cultural impact,
Yeah,
and I think it should beat all but 2 of them.
I mean, obviously they're not as good as the Beatles, and you're saying. Okay.
I mean, I'll say this.
so are you thinking like they're more of a 7? Because I'm just thinking like, I guess you have to be a huge, huge act to get into that 8 to 10 range. Like you have to be
Yeah.
like Led Zeppelin or Billy Joel to like get into the 9s.
I
and
would
stuff,
I would
and, like,
agree. So so maybe higher than all but 1 of them
I mean,
because I thought a 7.5.
Okay.
I'll say this. I like to do my music shopping. Like when I'm looking to buy physical music, I don't really like to go to, like Target, Walmart, or FYE, and get music. I like to go to a music store,
Sure.
preferably, like a Positively Records or the
Yeah.
Princeton Record Exchange, a place like that. And
Not a sponsor.
I
Right.
have seen Alice in Chains posters up on the. I mean, like that's the type of music store
Okay.
I like. I like going into a music
Right.
store that almost looks like it's somebody's basement, and there is just music everywhere. Posters.
Tyler wants to
up
be
to
Jack
rhyme
Black
no
in High
reason.
Fidelity.
Yeah,
Okay.
and
I've never seen that, but I've
and-
read the book.
There you go.
It's an excellent book.
again, you're gonna hear this a lot.
Nick
from
Hornby,
me.
not a sponsor.
You're gonna hear this from me a lot. I didn't really know who Alice in Chains were before you guys told me
Yeah.
to listen to them.
Okay.
But as soon as I looked them up and saw their album covers, I was like, "Oh, I've seen these albums."
Okay.
I
Right.
knew
So-
that this was an
Yeah.
important group. This wasn't some weird indie thing that you guys found and you're just
Yeah.
like, "We need your opinion."
Again,
on it.
I think 7.5.
I was more in like the 6 something range.
Yeah, I think. See, oddly enough, I really think you might be underselling them.
Maybe I'm underselling how popular they were, but I just didn't.
Actually, I
didn't think they were in that upper echelon in terms of popularity.
I distinctly remember being a kid. I want to say like around 5 or 6 in that range, and obviously, super into dinosaurs.
Who was it?
I was in a music store, and my dad prevented me from buying The Devil Puts Dinosaurs Here. I didn't want it because I had any idea what it was. It had a dinosaur skull.
I thought you were going to say them bones because bones like dinosaur bones.
It's so funny that you say that because that album was released in 2013. So you were a child 7 years ago.
Then I retract that. Then it must have been some other.
It must have been a different dinosaur album.
Yeah,
that does exist.
All right. Anyway,
maybe
I would
feel like an idiot
average
now.
you out maybe like a 7.2 if we average out where I'm at for your.
I'm okay with a 7.2.
Okay. Breadth of work. This is another one. So for they've only released 6 albums, and
Breadth of
only
Work,
3 were with Lane. Unfortunately,
Breadth of Work suffers because of that. Because I feel like after Lane they got worse.
For sure.
I think they're still at average.
I agree.
I would actually give them half a point above average for just the sheer
number of good songs. That
that came out on
I'm okay
those
with
albums.
That. I'm totally okay with that. Just because 6 albums is still. I think as we obviously get a lot deeper into this, we're going to see how few bands have actually managed to get through 6 albums.
Yeah.
And not many have nearly as many good songs as Alice in
not
Chains.
at all.
Instrumental talent, we talked about how great of singers they are.
It's got to be up there.
I
mean,
think
not
they're very talented musicians.
Very
as well.
talented.
I don't think they're virtuosos.
Jerry Cantrell is phenomenal on the guitar.
I agree, but he doesn't play that many solo. He mostly plays riffs and chords and things like he doesn't play a lot of solos.
But I mean, he's very, very good at the
excellent
guitar.
at what he does. I would agree. Would I compare him to Stevie Ray Vaughan as a guitar player?
No, I mean,
no.
I get that.
Right.
But
I'm just saying he's not a virtuoso. He's not a 10.
Right.
He's no Barry Gibb.
As far as vocally, the Cantrell Staley is as close to 10 as you can get for me.
So what do you think?
vocals.
Are you thinking in the 7-8 range?
I think that is a great spot for them.
Yeah.
Instrumental talent. And
I was
what about
personally going to rank
7.5?
them. I was going to say 7.6 or 7.5 works for me.
Let's do that. And songwriting is another thing that they're strong with.
So strong.
I mean, I know it was maybe Tyler didn't hear as much variation in their tunes as we did. But I did hear variation in the tune. I heard different styles.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, when I was listening to it, I could hear the variation.
Sure.
But
just overall, it's kind of like a tableau for him.
Right.
Looks the same.
And I didn't mean that in a negative way.
I would personally
took it
put
in a
them
negative
in
way,
in the high 5s. I think they're above average as songwriters.
Yeah.
Mostly because I think the next ranking is going to be high for
be
me. It's going to
really,
be real high
really
for
good.
me.
So songwriting, I'm going to give them a 5.8.
Yeah.
For Poetic Talent, I think this is definitely one of their stronger. I'm okay with that. Yeah, I mean that's obviously their stronger suit as well.
They
Lane
really
has all
did
that pain. Jerry had the pain.
They just
did a great
such
job
a
of putting
good
it out
job
there.
of writing about the struggles of their lives.
Yeah.
To a point where you could really feel it.
I totally agree. And I'm fine with that.
Feel it, and it made me like songs where Nick and Tyler, you both know that I'm super conscious of vocal performance, instrumental performance, songs that don't have that. Made me not care because of the lyrics.
Sure.
Which is rare for me.
Yeah, it's very rare for you. So that just brings us to X Factor, and I don't know if Alice in Chains necessarily has one.
No, they don't. I mean,
I don't
the
think
only
they
X
get
Factor you
points
can
for
give
them.
anyone in this era for me personally, that's a grunge band.
I think it's Nirvana because they're the grunge band.
Yeah,
They're
so I
seen as
wouldn't
that
give them an X
culture.
Factor.
Yeah. So that's still a solid round. Let me go over the final scores.
Yep,
and then we'll
let's
wrap
do the
this thing
final
up.
scores and wrap it up.
So in last place for this episode, unfortunately, would be the Jackson 5 with a 19.1
which I think is right where they should be.
I think
they scored a point higher than NSYNC.
Exactly.
And that is
right
about right.
Yeah. In the middle, we have the Yardbirds putting up a 25.1.
Respectable.
Yes, respectable. And Alice in Chains were the big winner with a 34 out of 50.
Which
55.
currently puts them in second place.
That's correct.
On our list.
Yes.
By a wide margin.
That's true. But we are not going to revel too much more about our list until we do our special episodes where we reveal at some point
for
who
people
the top
who have
50
actually
artists are.
listened to all 3 episodes so far,
hopefully
they know roughly where we're
know.
at with our rankings.
Yes, but we are quite fond of Alice in Chains, let's be honest.
Yeah, really well done.
Okay, cool. So that's episode 3 in the books. Stay tuned for next week where one of the 3 artists that we will be looking at is the Cranberries.
Yep. So don't linger on this one. Go ahead and check out the next episode ASAP as soon as it's released. And other than that, I'm going to go ahead and sign us off. This has been Totem Talks, and have a great day.